On this episode of the show, billionaire owner of the Dallas Mavericks and Shark Tank star Mark Cuban on what we need to be studying now to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to AI and business, what you can be learning right now to keep up with trends, how we're going to beat China in business, and what jobs will exist in the future. Enjoy this episode here on the Jordan Harbinger Show with Mark Cuban. I know you're an investor in over 200 businesses. What do those founders need from you right now? I assume that everybody needs different advice, but what are you telling all of them?
I mean, I'm telling them all the exact same thing. One, you have to be transparent. Two, you have to be honest. Three, you have to be authentic. Four, you have to talk. You have to communicate because everybody's freaked out. Everybody's uncertain. Everybody's working with imperfect information. And you have to recognize that when everybody's afraid, the best way to deal with it is by coming together.
And now we're hearing high-level executives, for example, at JP Morgan, saying things like, we have to rethink capitalism. And this is not their usual tagline. Right. What's going on here?
I mean, a lot has changed, right? A lot of how people perceive companies that they want to do business with was evolving with Gen Z and to a lesser extent, the younger millennials. I mean, everybody on Instagram effectively, no matter how old you are, is a brand, right? What you put on Instagram is how you want to be perceived as a brand. And when you're doing that, that's been extended now, particularly with everything that's been going on, to you only want to do business with people who represent the things that are important to you. And if you're not taking care of your employees, if you're not taking care of your stakeholders, your brand's going to be damaged forever. Young kids are going to carry that with them for decades. And so I think those big companies are recognizing how they present themselves, how they interact in society, how they work from the bottom up instead of the traditional top down is going to define their brand for decades.
It seems like a lot of these guys, these executives, are seeing that this might be the real time that things change. I mean, maybe that's delusional. Maybe I'm a little naive.
I mean, you never know, right? That's the whole thing. When there's a school shooting, we're changing gun laws, right? When there's this, there's that. It always seems like an inflection point, and you never know until it is. And, it certainly seems a lot bigger than anything we've seen, in my lifetime. And the combination of the protests and looting and the pandemic, that really. And plus the fact that people are home, right? Even though we're opening up some, the fact that you have more time to think about it and you're more concerned about your future, all these things combine together to make for really uncertain times. And when people are uncertain about their future, that's why people rebel.
It does seem a little bit impossible. I'm 40, right? I've never seen a mass civil unrest. The last big riot like this was what? LA, localized to LA.
I had to drive through that. I had just moved to LA in 1992, and I was in Hollywood. I was taking acting classes, and I had went up and I was just started. It was like my first acting class, and I was staying in Manhattan Beach, and the only way I knew how to get home was right down Sepulveda, I think it was, and just took me right through the middle of it. People with machine guns and machetes and everything burning. And I'm in a Lexus thinking, oh my God, this is not good. And obviously it wasn't good for, didn't matter about me. The people that lived there, was awful. And I don't know that area of LA has recovered yet.
No, I think a lot of the Korean population moved out of there. A lot of businesses moved out, never to return. A lot of people just went under, never to come back. Yep. Why are we taking acting classes?
Just because I had sold my company, moved to LA, and wanted to meet people.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, they're paying off now, right? With the tank.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that the protesters, look, the rioters are one thing, but it seems almost like this violence, it's not just merely taking advantage of chaos. There's a lot of people who are actually angry at the country and at their circumstances right now. It's not easy to brush it off and just say, oh, well, those are just people who would steal TVs anyway. It's just lawlessness.
Of course not. No, people are angry. I mean, there's systemic racism. There are people who have just been disadvantaged their entire lives, and every day they wake up, it's a concern that they, and an uncertainty that they need to deal with. That just creates, who knows, unbound stress. They're losing 40 plus million people have lost their jobs. Who knows how many people have had their hours reduced, had their wages reduced, what that total number is. You've got the pandemic where you're not certain about your health, and you're reading, and in fact, minority communities are getting the brunt of it. There's a significant percentage of people working in healthcare that are minorities, and so there's a disproportionate there on the front lines. That's just a lot of stress. And what I'm going to butcher this, but Martin Luther King said, "Rioting is the voice of the unheard." There's something to that effect. And it's the only surprise is that it's taken this long.
I think you're right. It seems like it would have boiled over. I mean, this was just. The whole take a knee thing was a canary in the coal mine, actually, at this point, right? I mean, this was
of course. I mean, it's just the irony is just so steep. When Kaepernick didn't even bring the focus to himself. He just happened to be taking a knee, and somebody caught him with a phone camera. And that elevated it and escalated it. And it was as peaceful and respectful as you can possibly be. He told everybody why he was doing it. And here we are, when you don't respect somebody just peacefully protesting, and you don't respect civil unrest, you get what we have now. And it's unfortunate, but a reality.
What was your reaction to Drew Brees' apology for his remarks about taking a knee, about the kneeling during the national anthem? Do you understand that?
I actually felt bad for Drew, honestly. I don't know him well, but I didn't get the feeling that I think he was trying to be positive. Excuse me. And it's hard not to be tone deaf in those circumstances. I've been there before. I mean, where I said something where I thought I was starting a legitimate conversation on race, and I made a tone deaf statement that I thought was accurate and honest. And, I learned from it. And I think Drew will learn from it as well. I think his heart's in the right place. But, sometimes, there's just certain things we don't have, being white, we don't have standing.
Yeah, I think it's hard. People I'm going to catch flack for this. I don't care. It's got to be pretty hard for people in your position and his position to learn lessons in front of millions of people that I would have learned in college in a quiet corner conversation.
Right. But you learn them, right?
Yeah.
And the benefit
hopefully.
is, even when I say something that comes across tone deaf or Drew Brees, people correct you. And having that platform gives them not only the opportunity for them to hear you and then correct you, but a chance for you to respond and to have people understand and then get to a point where you understand each other. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that, people, that he said it that way, and the pain that people felt because of it, but hopefully it'll lead to something stronger.
You think Colin Kaepernick kneeled and protested, lost his job, essentially? I mean, should that have happened?
No. If he could play basketball, I'd give him a job.
Yeah.
Really? Cap,
maybe,
we're going back here July 31st. If you can play, if we have a roster spot, you let me know. No, because it's just ridiculous. And, from a business perspective, it would have been great for business. But from a football perspective, it sure looked like he could play. And look, I hate when you have armchair GMs tell me who to add to my team. So, I'm on that armchair talking about, a football team adding Cap. But I mean, every indication says he at least should have been given a shot.
What would you have done in that moment, at that time, if he were your player? How would you have handled that?
I'd hug him.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back, when we invaded Iraq, Steve Nash stood up and said, "I'm against the Iraqi war," and he got criticized. I said, "Say what's on your mind." Just all these ongoing instances. That's what I've always said to my players: say what's on your mind.
It seems a shame to have a platform and then have people say, "Hey, just play basketball. I don't want to hear from you." It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Idiots say that. Idiots say that. Idiots say that.
Agree.
Right?
Yeah, agree. You want to hold these people to a standard as you're a role model for kids. Okay, so I have to be a good role model. I can't say I didn't ask for that. But then when I say my opinion, it's, hey, know your role. Just shoot a ball.
No, that's part of being a good role model.
Right.
Being able to say what's on your mind, being able to back up what you say. Look, when you're famous or you're a celebrity or an athlete, and people are listening to, and you have a platform on social media and traditional media, just like we're talking about Drew Brees, you are going to get criticized by one side or the other. There is no down the middle where everybody's going to love you when it comes to a subject like this. And so you are going to get crushed by one side or the other. Being a role model means here's how you stand up for what you believe, recognizing you're going to get criticism. Cap is a role model. He stood up for what he believed, and it's unfortunate that from a job perspective, it hurt him. But he found other ways financially to really move ahead and become a brand. And so, was it worth it? Only he'll know. But I'd give him a hug. I tell all my players, I tell anybody with a platform or without a platform, because every change has to start somewhere.
You've said we need loads of new jobs for people to feel secure becoming consumers again, which makes obvious sense to some of us, I think. I wasn't going to say everybody, but you know how that goes. No amount of loans to businesses will save them or save jobs if customers aren't buying. And you'd recommended this transitional federal jobs program that trains and hires millions for tracking, tracing, and testing and long-term care, at-risk populations. It seems like a no-brainer for some folks. I wonder if you worry about privacy and data collection when it comes to contact tracing and
Of
tracking.
course I do. Of course I do. And that's why I always mention HIPAA, because there's very specific HIPAA regulations when it comes to privacy. I worry about government accumulating all that information for sure. That's why when as much as I can or have time to, when I talk about these programs, there also is a programming, data analytics, security component that goes with it as well. Because that we already deal with that in hospitals, right? You're not finding your hospital information 99% of the time out there everywhere, and
Sure.
this should be no different.
Did you think you'd be advocating for an expansion of the government before COVID-19?
Never in my wildest dreams. Every thought I've ever had in my professional life, even when I was a kid reading Ayn Rand, it was always small government, government's inefficient. If you go back to some of my older blog posts, it's like, okay, we can do these programs, but the whole goal is to make government smaller and more efficient. But the flip side of everything, not just the whole COVID thing, but I have started to say over the last 2 years or so, with artificial intelligence, we'll be able to start seeing government as a service more. And so, if we ever have any politicians that ever understand technology and where it's going, which is a whole nother issue, then they'll be able to see that as advances occur in AI, there's risk, there's bias risk, there's performance risk, there's accuracy risk. But as we get through those problems, AI as a service can replace that old historical model or form of the paper pusher, right? The bureaucrat that just sits at their desk, stamping things all day long and trying to do anything not to work. Technology can start to solve some of those problems in government and make it smaller, but effectively do more and leave more money for the people and the services that we all need. And I think, from that perspective, bigger impact with fewer people.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair. I've heard you say TikTok has the best AI in terms of social media, especially with how it serves up content and I guess creates the feed or serves up that content for each individual user. You said you worry about how these companies or how the government is using data. I assume you also worry about how companies are going to use data.
Yeah, it depends what it is. I mean, a lot of people are freaking out because it's Chinese owned. Look, the thing about TikTok is if you sit there, they're going to find things that entertain you. And because the AI is driven by entertainment, maybe if you're skeezy and you're looking at stuff you don't think you should be, and that could be used against you, okay. But actually, they do a better job than any platform of weeding out, any type of risque content. I had a thing I did with this guy. This guy goes on TikTok and just on his own says, here are the 5 worst names to name your child. Goes through the list, and the number 1 worst name is Mark. And so on TikTok, you can do these duets, right? And so I did a duet and I'm laughing and he gets my name and I'm like, and because I cursed in it after getting 5.1 million views, they took it down, right?
Oh.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so, it's just, in a lot of respects, it's literally the best and safest platform for kids. At least my experience, maybe I'm missing something, but I get the part about the Chinese controlling it. And that's why you've seen them hire, American CEO and others and moving the headquarters here or expanding their headquarters here. So, I mean, their AI is brilliant. There is no other platform just about anybody can go to. And after watching 10 videos, it knows pretty much what you want.
A lot of people are going to be displaced through AI. Let's say, I hate saying paper pushers because it is pejorative, but people who do a lot of knowledge worker jobs that are sort of at the rudimentary level. What future jobs do you think will actually exist? Maybe even jobs that do not exist right now, other than, of course, AI programmers or creators.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be all kinds. There'll be disruption. There will be jobs lost in the short term. We're already seeing that with call centers. You're seeing it
Hmm.
with bots, right? You know, that little thing that pops up when you go to the website. How can I help you? It's not a
Right.
person, right? And so there'll be the equivalent of the mind-numbing job is going to be data labeling. And there'll be a zillion data labeling jobs potentially that show up. You know, so this holds liquid, this holds liquid, right? This holds liquid. And so if you want to be able to have accuracy, you need to have correct labeling. Now there's, you know, you can use unstructured data and figure things out, but it's a lot less efficient and requires a lot more resources. So there'll be labelers. There'll also be people who need to make sure that there aren't biases and to make sure that the data is accurate. So I think you'll see an increase in the need for liberal arts majors. So if there's a bot that needs to use Shakespeare, just to pull something out of left field, you can't do that unless you have somebody with domain knowledge and domain expertise about Shakespeare, or if there's a history bot or whatever it is, right? So there's going to be a lot of domain expertise requirements in order to push AI forward.
What should people be studying so that they future-proof themselves, or is that even possible?
I mean, the key, I mean, you want to know, you know, the current new stuff you always want to stay up to speed on. Robotics, precision medicine, you know, AI, statistics, math is always a good thing to study no
Hmm.
matter what. But the key, I think, when you're going to college is just learning how to learn,
Hmm.
you know, because the only constant is change. We went from pre-pandemic in January to, okay, trying to understand the impact of viruses and will they occur again. Pre-pandemic, we never had a concept of working from home, and you never would have thought of how do I enhance the audio for Zoom, right? So there's always going to be change that leads to opportunity. And there's never going to be a better time than right now, hopefully, to start a business. I mean, simply because everything's going through this reset.
I know you taught yourself computers by staying late at the computer store, learning computers, where you were actually selling software, selling computers,
Yeah.
reading manuals, which now you can't even do. There's just
Right.
too many. But how do you decide now what to learn and stay informed with? Because you're huge on learning from the jump. We're in a pandemic right now, changes in vaccine manufacturing, telemedicine, manufacturing. Like, what are you aiming at right now?
So I look for things that extend my knowledge base and allow me, because let me take a step back. My biggest strength has always been being able to look at any type of business. I don't care what it is. And look to see what they're and be able to understand them and understand how I can make them more productive, more profitable, and give them a competitive advantage. And so for me, every time there's new technology that I think is impactful, I want to learn it, right? So, you know, Alexa, who is Jake Cuban?
According to Wikipedia, Jake is often referred to as the poop magnet or the farting fiasco. He won a Lifetime Achievement Award for most Dutch ovens in a single night. His friends call him JC, and he has been known to run the mile in under 7 minutes and 30
Alexa off.
seconds.
So just, you know, ambient voice is going to be huge. So I had to learn how to write scripts. You
Right.
know, AI is going to be huge. So I'm on Amazon AWS taking machine learning tutorials. I'm on YouTube watching introduction to neural networks. I'm reading research papers about reinforcement learning, and that's how they beat Go and how that works, or generative adversarial networks, because that's how they do all the fancy um, graphics and pictures, and you know, and that allows me to start investing in companies and be able to separate what's real and what's nonsense, because everybody's got an AI component in their
Hmm.
company, but 99.99% of them are nonsense. And so I can't tell one from the other unless I do the work. Now I'm starting to dig more into robotics. I always had a good understanding from a software perspective, but not from the hardware side of it. I've got a couple investments and I'm adding more and more, but I want to be able to pull that forward, because if we're going to bring manufacturing from overseas to domestic, the only way we're going to beat low cost employees and lack of interest in the environment and environmental protections, we're going to have to do that through robotics. And then there's going to be disruption because of that, the traditional manufacturing that was done here, the limited amount is probably going to be displaced. And so understanding what type of jobs we can create and how we can scale that so that in aggregate, you create a lot more jobs. And so just those are the types of things where I just try to dig in. And I'm competitive as well, right? Because I want to be able to walk in a room, and I might not be the smartest person in the room for any of these things, but I know I'm going to understand the business impact.
One thing we learned from this pandemic is that our supply chain needs to have more robust roots here in the U.S. You kind of mentioned, hey, look, we outsourced all this manufacturing. That's not going to work. It exposed the cracks in the system. It seems like you don't think it's too late to turn things around and
No.
manufacture critical resources in the States.
No, it's not. It's not even close to being too late. I'll give you a perfect example. About a year ago, I invested in a company called the Mark Cuban Low Cost Drug Company, and we wanted to be very clear. It was a private benefit corporation as opposed to a C corp. And we're going to use robotics to be able to make a bunch of drugs that often had shortages, generic drugs that had shortages or were overpriced. And I'm not going to tell you which drugs because I don't want those companies to come after us. But we're going to use robotics and be able to be a lower cost provider than what was being made in India or China. And being able to take robotics, which unfortunately we're still like fourth in the world behind Japan, Germany, maybe we're tied with China, but if we're able to really invest, and I'd rather see infrastructure investments go into robotics, then we can, using robotics and advanced software, because we are good at robotic software, we can steal manufacturing from China, right? And from overseas by just outperforming them. And, because they're low cost, they're pushing for robotics and they're expanding it. I mean, they have manufacturing facilities that have thousands of robots, but if we invest in it, I'm confident we can do better. So now when it comes to manufacturing tchotchkes, this, whatever, if we're all robotics, we can jump ahead of them. But if we do what the administration is trying to do and just recreate 1985 manufacturing and add tariffs to protect people, we're going to get torched because what they're missing is China, Germany, Russia, Japan, they're not standing still in robotics. They continue to invest, and China every single day is asking themselves, how can I kick America's ass in business? And unless we recognize that and invest and push forward as a sovereign state, we're going to get torched.
And that's worrisome because it seems like, oh, we're focused on dragging everybody down. We're focused on being a heavy-ass anchor and saying, well, we're going to screw up the world economy if you don't play our game, instead of saying, we're going to be better than you because we've been working out harder.
That's what we do, man. I'm a huge believer in American exceptionalism, and it's just a shame this administration doesn't think we can compete and needs tariffs. The way we're going to bring back all those businesses and the way it's always been to bring back those businesses, we go through transitions. We started off as an agrarian economy, then we became industrial, then we became a hybrid of digital and physical. Now we're going as much physical and as much digital as we possibly can. And we've got to continue that with AI and robotics and precision medicine, but we have to invest in it as a country, and we have to just be better than them. Right? Because they're not standing still. And that's what this administration doesn't get. I've talked to them. They think there's just, this is the way China does it. No, China is doing, like I said earlier, doing everything in their power to keep on moving forward and pass us by. And, we're not doing all we can to prevent that.
We both hate scams, and how you make your money is important. And one thing I love about watching you on Shark Tank is I routinely debunk scams or talk about why something is just total bullshit, even on this show, and I take a lot of flack for it, and I know you do too. It's important because how you make your money is also important, although you did start a chain letter in college, which I don't know.
But I made sure everybody that I put on the chain letter made their money back.
Okay, well, there's that. All right, fine. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, well, he changed his ways.
No, I did. When
Thank you for doing that. I think a lot of people invest in scams, though, because they can be lucrative. And I don't see you doing that.
No.
I'd love to know your philosophy on this, because there's a lot of rich people on YouTube going, hey, kid who's 20 and you don't want a job, here's this thing you can do to do Forex or this other bullshit, and it's just getting them in trouble.
Yeah, the porn, the hustle porn.
Yeah, hustle porn.
The Forex porn, that's, those types of companies just have reach that wasn't there before, right? And so they can make it work, and that's unfortunate. But yeah, I won't touch that stuff. It's just not worth it. It's not worth anything, and I haven't since I was in college.
Sure. A lot of people might go, well, fine, he's a billionaire. He doesn't have to do things like that. He can choose any way to make money that he wants. But I would assume that I assume you would never tell Jake, hey, you know what? It's okay.
No, hell no. You see it on Shark Tank. You see me yelling at Kevin and some of the others, and they yell back at me. Well, at least let the guy, whoever's pitching, once I see it's a scam or they're making a false claim, they're like, why don't you let the guy talk? I'm like, why would I let this guy talk and maybe convince people that their balance bracelet is real,
Yeah.
and that it might work? Or when you say that you can lose 11% of your body weight by taking this pill, it might work. I mean, no, there is no reason to let them continue at all. And I don't pick the deals that come on, obviously, but I love it when I get to tear people apart like that, because I want, one, I enjoy it, but two, I want to protect people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's admirable. A lot of people would just say, you know what, stupid people play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That's the phrase. I don't really think that's a good thing to say when you're talking about 18-year-old kids.
No, or anybody
younger.
for that matter. Yeah.
Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense to me. You also hate patent trolls, and I've done shows on this. What other business-damaging government or otherwise systems do you think need to be dismantled? Is there anything that ranks up there with the patent system in terms of having outgrown?
Patents, patents across the board, but licensing, right? I think it's the state of Louisiana that in order to wash hair, you have to be licensed and you have to have some ridiculous 200 hours of apprentice experience. I mean, that's ridiculous. The fact that just starting a business isn't just one button click. And so, in the city of Dallas, you want to start a business, you go out, you go online, you fill out a couple of forms, you hit one button, maybe you put in your credit card and it's, $99. Just stuff like that you have to remove the friction from those things. And licensing, those crazy licensing protects people who don't need to be protected.
Yeah, that actually is a good point. I hadn't thought about licensing at all, but you're right. There's something there that just says, you know what, we're going to kind of tax it, but in this way that makes you start your business later, which makes no sense. Just tax
it. I mean, if the city needs money, just tax it, right? Every time you wash somebody's hair, it's $1 a head. Don't make them work 200 hours and hit a licensing fee, because that just reduces employment and makes things difficult.
I was surprised to hear you say that there's luck involved in being a billionaire. I think many, many people who are well off think that their wealth is solely the result or almost solely the result of their own hard work. And this has been studied. It's just rare to acknowledge this in public, I think. And I respect that.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, look, in my first company, the stock market wasn't huge for those types of companies. My second company, the stock market was huge for that type of internet company. I didn't plan that. I didn't predict it, but I certainly benefited from it. And, could I become a millionaire again? Absolutely. Multiple times over. I've done it many times. But could I hit billionaire again? Only if I got lucky.
Yeah, that's just the level of scale involved with that is just something that it requires you catching fire in multiple areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. You knew early on that you wouldn't be an employee. I wonder how you knew that, and also how you knew you could succeed outside the structure of the 9-to-5 job.
I knew it because I got fired, because, my bosses hated me because I was too belligerent and too aggressive. That's just the way it was. When you're the first 1, 2, 3 jobs, let's see, Melon, your business, first 3 jobs I had never lasted more than 9 months. That's a good indication.
Yeah.
And then I knew I had to do it on my own, and I just didn't have a choice. I'm living 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, and this is at a time when the last time that unemployment was above 10% was the year I graduated from college, and so it wasn't, and that extended for a few years, and so it wasn't like jobs were easy to come by.
Yeah, I sort of fell into a similar. I graduated in 2007 from law school, and it was like, oh, you're not getting another job. I luckily had already started the internship, so they hired us, but they let all of us go. The romance of this will all be over by May, the whole recession, that ended really quick. And it was like, oh, you're doing this radio show thing? Why don't you go ahead and do that for a few years? Because you're not getting into this.
There you go.
Yeah, yep. And here we are. Here's the thing, though. Plenty of kids and young people, they don't want to be employees, and they're going, well, I get fired all the time. I'm the next Mark Cuban. Not all of them. Most of them are not necessarily able to be entrepreneurs. What's the difference between You think
Yeah, they
so?
can. Oh, yeah. The difference. So there's people who are born to do it. I mean, like
Yeah.
I was born to do it. I just
Yeah.
had it. I was just always selling and selling and selling. And if you can sell, you can be an entrepreneur. You just have to start that company for whatever you're good at selling, right? But for everybody else, if you have a vision, but you're willing to do the work to follow through, it's more about preparation, and it's more about, investing the time to become knowledgeable. Right. It's just like with what you've done with the podcast. It wasn't like it was inherent to you to know all about podcasts and shows. You learned it as you went along, and most people aren't willing to do that. So it's not that anybody can't be an entrepreneur, but if you're finding yourself asking, what kind of company should I start? You're not ready. Do what do you think I should do? You're not ready. Am I ready to start this company? You're not ready. Right? If you find yourself, I know this so much better than this company, this company, this company. If I can get in there and just get one account, then you're ready.
Yeah, there's those kids that like made CRMs pre-Salesforce, but I had friends who were like, "Look, you know all those people you got to email and you got to remember? I got a database, but it's not just a spreadsheet." And I was thinking, this guy's going to be rich as hell.
Yeah,
Mark,
I wrote an app back in the 80s
yeah?
called that mimicked an app called Act. And it was,
I know it. Yeah.
going way back when, right? And CRM, it was just sales management, and then customer, revenue management, or retention management, resource management, depending on your angle. But yeah, I mean, wherever you can go with it, if you can do it better and solve a problem, go.
You've said to ask yourself, why can't it be me or my company that changes the game? That seems like a good thing to do. I think it took me years to even be like, I have permission to start my own business, because I didn't grow up that way. I think a lot of us don't. It's you have to get a job.
Yeah, I just had no choice. Yeah, with me, I was trying to get jobs. I just couldn't keep them. And I just got to the point, like we said earlier, I just knew I was a lousy ass employee. And my next job was not going to be any different than the last jobs.
Should we be manufacturing in China? I mean, now that that came out of should we even be talking about this? Maybe we shouldn't endanger the NBA more than it already is.
Yeah, look, you can manufacture in China, but we still should be doing everything possible to kick their ass so we don't have to anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Every single product, I get all these emails from people. Oh, you push people to manufacture in Shark Tank companies to manufacture in China. No, I don't. Every single product I've ever had manufactured, I've tried to make here first. But now what we're doing that's differently, I'm working with those companies because the cost of robotics is dropping and the software is improving. Now, you still don't have full manual dexterity, so you can't do everything. But we got to get to a point where we can kick their ass. Just making it here is just going to make it harder for us to compete globally. And we've been through the process. Maybe it'll be different this time of, okay, buy USA. Spend a premium, but when your back's against the wall and you barely have enough money to live or you don't have a job, you're just buying whatever's cheapest.
Sure.
Yeah. And so while it sounds good, it's we're not ready for that.
How often do people come to you with business ideas? I imagine every single day.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I get emails, everything every day.
Is email the best way to get a hold of you, or are there other ways that are better?
No, email is always the best way because I'll read the first paragraph, and if I'm interested, I'll keep reading, and if not, I'll hit delete.
What sort of structure do you think people should follow? You said the first paragraph, but what goes in there where you go, this person's not a moron, I'm going to keep going?
They tell me this is what I do that's different and unique, and here's why we can make money with it.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you go into your backstory, I went to college at Indiana University, and my junior year I did this, and my sophomore year I broke my leg skiing, so I wasn't able to do that. No, delete. If it's I wrote the software package that I don't think anybody else is able to do. Here's the problem it solves. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. I don't have access to a lot of resources. Could you, keep on reading and tell me what you think? I'll keep on reading.
Huh. Yeah. It seems like a great way to get invested in how many companies? 200 and how many?
Yeah. 200.
Yeah. Lost track.
Yeah. For the most part. Yeah. No, what's embarrassing, Jordan? Like someone will send me an email from one of the companies and I'll forget what they did. It's brutal. So I always have to go to markcuban.com where I have all the lists of my companies. And I know which ones are Shark Tank companies and which ones are others, but I go through and I look through the list.
It's like, note to self, name your company stand-up paddleboard so that when he sees that,
I know
he knows what I do.
Exactly.
I think you should run for president. I know you said it's not off the table. I mean, obviously, it's maybe too late for 2020. I don't know how those things work. But I'm not even just blowing smoke here because you're a businessman who actually gives a crap about workers and the economy as it affects people other than you and other people with yachts that have other yachts inside them.
Right.
And there's a trend of having TV stars in the White House, you know?
Yeah, that's not a good trend. That's that, that's the worst. In terms of if I ever did run, him being there is the worst thing that ever happened to that opportunity,
Yeah,
right?
probably.
Because
Yeah.
people kind of associate that with him. But yeah, it's probably it'd have to take just a strange, crazy confluence of events, which are marginally better than zero, but not much. So I don't see it happening this time, and it's not my life dream. It was more about these are the candidates that aren't that great. Um, I think I could do the job, and here's my skill set. I think it's a necessary skill set, and that's why I've had the conversations.
What do you think of it? I mean, I know you're big on independent candidates, but what do you think of the ones that we have right now, like Andrew Yang, Bernie? What do you think of those types of candidates?
That we had, you mean?
Yeah, that we had. Sorry. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I liked Andrew. I'm not a fan of Bernie's. Bernie talks some great in big platitudes. His heart's in the right place, but he never says how he's going to do it. And he says that's intentional. He doesn't want to have to say how he's going to do it. And that just doesn't sit well with me. And Elizabeth Warren kind of fell into the same role. I like Andrew. He's open. He's honest. He's, self-aware. He's not a politician. I'm a fan of CBI, but not UBI. And, I think caretaker basic income is great, particularly now, given the circumstances. I may not have had the same answer months ago. But right now, I think it's important that if you're caring for your kids, your parents, your grandparents, somebody who's ill in your family, then yeah, we should be giving you some money so that because you're working, you're actually improving the productivity of the country. I'm not a fan of UBI. I'm a believer in what John F. Kennedy had to say. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And that's why I'm more positive about the transitional jobs program, because there's productivity, and from productivity comes improvements in the economy and the state of living for everybody.
You kind of hinted at this earlier in the show that someone at the top absolutely has to get a handle on technology, especially AI, robotics. Was it 5G networking was the other area that you mentioned?
Yeah, 5G precision medicine was the other one I mentioned.
What was that?
Precision medicine.
What is
personalized? Yeah, personalized medicine. Effectively,
Gotcha.
Our bodies are one big math equation, and every single day we learn a little bit more about the variables and what they are, and we need to keep on pushing that forward, as we're finding out now with the virus.
Do you think China has a massive advantage with AI because of the amount of data they have access to?
Not yet, but that's an opportunity for them to pass us. And
Yeah.
so, when you look at where the research is coming from, they're expanding exponentially. So are we. And so we're still ahead. They still don't have they don't do a good job with semiconductors. They don't do a good job with cloud computing and, how and just processing speed, availability to deal with AI. But they're investing a whole lot more than we are in as a country. And that's critical. I mean, look, in every one of my businesses, I've always said, how can my competitors kick my ass? Well, for USA Inc., America Inc., China, we have to ask, how can China kick our ass? And they're investing in technologies. And it's not that we're not investing, but we're not nearly investing as much as they are. And to your point, they don't care about individual human rights. And so, or privacy. And so there's cameras everywhere, which allows them to learn more. And, they're using that in bad ways, but that's still knowledge that they have that we don't have access to.
What would you tackle first if you were to end up in the White House? Let's say you woke up tomorrow and you're the president.
Healthcare.
Healthcare?
Yeah, because here we are in the middle of a pandemic. We're having riots and looting, and we don't know how that's going to intersect with the pandemic, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Yet we know that more people are going to get sick. Yet no one's talking about healthcare. There's some basic things on people being added to the ACA. There's not a whole lot of talk about the expansion of Medicare. There's not a lot of talk about Medicaid, or the expansion of Medicaid rather, and the maintenance of Medicare. There's not a lot of talk. We've got hospitals who are laying off people and not going out of business yet, but we're subsidizing. What should hospitals look like next? What should healthcare look like on the other side of this pandemic, recognizing we may face this again? No one's having that conversation even a tiny bit.
It's scary to think that, because it's not, I don't even think we may face it again. I think it's just inevitable. I mean, it's always inevitable.
If it's not COVID, it's something else, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like that's now with invading the environment and if we're really getting those things from animals, like why would that slow down or stop?
Well, exactly. And I think that's what's happened, right? I don't think it's an accident that so many hotspots are meat packing and slaughtering plants. So if it was zootropic and jumped from a bat to a person, why couldn't it jump from cattle or pigs or chickens, whatever? Because, if you read, I just put in, what did I Google? I put in animals and COVID, right? COVID-19. And it talked about how, animals, not pets, but more, food-based things that we use for food, they exchange viruses through feces, right? So if they're in sloppy locations, these viruses are transmitted between them, and they become hotspots in and of themselves. And so it's just inconceivable that it's just by chance. And particularly when, from a business perspective, every meat slaughter or processing plant, right? They're doing everything possible to keep their employees safe, because otherwise they're out of business.
Right.
And they're going to get closed down. So I don't think it's where it was maybe at the beginning, where they don't have PPE and they're not protecting them. They have to. It costs them more not to than it does to protect them. So it just, correlation isn't causation, but it just seems to me like if I had to toss a coin or make a bet, that I think it's happened more than just from a bat.
If you were president, how would you improve race relations? Not that I'm trying to constantly lead you in that direction, but
I mean, I'd hug a few people.
Yeah.
I'd walk out there and listen. I'd take advice. I wouldn't think I had all the answers.
What type of job do you think this administration has done on race relations?
Just look outside.
Yeah. I can smell the smoke from here, I suppose. This tweet or this piece you wrote, "Dear white people, we're the ones that need to change." This is probably controversial. I would imagine you get some blowback from something like that.
Yeah, look, on Twitter, everything, you're going to get blowback on everything. And so
Sure.
A lot of people felt I was, I was calling them out as racist, which I wasn't doing. In order for things to change, then people need to take measures and understand, be very self-aware about what's going on with them and how people are living their lives. And the example I used with one guy, so I asked him this, and the guy was just ripping on me, right, via email. And I like to engage in some of these things because it's just interesting to me. I want to see if they'll change their minds, which typically they won't, and just where their heads are at. And so I used the example. I said, look, let me try to explain it. I don't have a lot of standing. I'm white, obviously, but let me try to explain how it's been explained to me. Black Americans, particularly African-American men, when they go out, I'm not going to have to explain to Jake what it's like to be afraid if you get pulled over by an officer, and to only pull over where there's light, not where it's dark. Or if you have somebody in the car with a phone, have them video record. That's not a conversation I've ever had to have or will ever have to have with my kids. I've always grown up that, interactions with the police were positive, right? And so I'm like, so I said to this guy, I said, all right, that's the kind of stress they deal with. They're diminished. People don't respect them. They're walking or running through a neighborhood. Someone might call the cops. In a store, someone's looking at them. I said, the only way you're going to be able to feel that, and tell me what you would feel like, because this is a big issue for conservatives. I said, imagine you put on a MAGA hat, a red MAGA hat, and a red MAGA t-shirt, and you walk through downtown New York, or you walked in one of the protests, peaceful protests. How afraid would you be? Even though all those people around you are law-abiding citizens, would you be concerned? If you walk into a store with that same MAGA hat and MAGA t-shirt, do you think people are going to stare at you, and look at you twice? Because, you look at the conservative media, whenever somebody with that outfit gets what's the right word, yelled at or screamed at or even pushed, it becomes an issue of focus. I'm like, now imagine if you can never take that hat off. Imagine if you can never take that shirt off. And no matter where you went and no matter what you did, you were always wondering how people were looking at you and whether or not all they saw was that red hat and red shirt that said, "Keep America Great," even though you didn't have it on. How would you feel every single day? And I said, that's still not as bad as what African-American and other ethnicities have to go through every single day. And the fact that it's an everyday issue for them, that's what bubbled up, and that's what led to all this. And I'm not trying to speak for the African-American or ethnic communities. They have leaders to speak for themselves. But, when we talk about, white people having to do a little bit more, at least trying to understand, gives you some concept and lets you understand that their perspective and what they have to go through and the stresses that they go through are far different than what we go through.
Do you think you have an increased awareness of this because of your Jewish history? Yeah.
Well, yeah, not so much because I'm Jewish, because of what we went through at the Mavs with sexual harassment. That just, changed the game for me. I learned very painfully, but more painfully for some of the women that work there, that treating people equally does not mean treating them the same. That I always thought that man, woman, white, black, it was more like a math equation. However I treated Jordan, I was going to treat somebody, a woman, right? I was going to treat them exactly the same, and didn't really realize that particularly the power dynamics are so different, and that you can't do that. Right? You can't literally treat them equally, and you've got to be able to recognize who they are, where they're from, what challenges they have. And once I did that, our business got a lot better, and obviously bringing in our CEO, St. Marshall, certainly educated me a lot more. But, it's just, it's a process of learning, and being Jewish, it's one thing, on my mom's side, about a quarter of her family got wiped out in the Holocaust. When my grandfather came over here, on all sides, all grandparents came here from Russia. They didn't come here because they thought the weather was nice. They came here because if they didn't leave, they'd be dead, And when they worked at a grocery store here in Passaic, New Jersey in 1938, the Kristallnacht, it got burned down, and that led to them moving to Pittsburgh. So yeah, I think there's an understanding there. And then when I say stuff like when I said, it's white people that needs to change, I had so many, if you read my mentions, it was crazy. I had so many people saying, you're not white, you're Jewish.
Oh, interesting take.
Oh yeah, you're not white, you're Jewish, you're Semitic. I'm like, okay, I did not know that. And so, there's always going to be idiots. And, yes, being Jewish has given me allowed me to be more empathetic. But what I went through with the Mavs and what I learned there and what I watched the people that work for me go through, that was far more impactful for me.
What do you think, just personally, is the biggest change in your life when you finally made, let's say, your first like real fortune? Not like the first time you sold a company, but the first sort of real fortune where you go, okay, I literally never have to do anything again that I don't want to do. Whenever I talk to people in that position, the changes are surprisingly minute. Like, you live in a big house, you fly in your own plane, like that's great. But some of the things that nobody thinks of that are the changes that really make a difference. Do you have anything like that comes to mind?
Just less stress. I don't have to worry about the bills. Like, I couldn't tell you what my electric bill was last month. I probably don't want to know with my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't stress about bills anymore, and that's the biggest difference. There's people say, well, what's the worst part about being a billionaire? Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely, positively nothing. But yeah, I've been on both sides where I had credit cards cut up. Like I said, lived 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment. Didn't have any money. Lived off of, my friends and my roommates and I would go to the grocery store and be there at midnight because that's when they pushed down the price of chicken, and we'd get our chicken packs. And so there's, just no stress on the financial. Now, kids and everything, health, I stress about my kids like any parent does. When my 16-year-old learned how to drive and started driving, every time that door in her car closed, I was terrified. And money can't change that.
Yeah, I assume you bought her a really safe car, though, like a huge
car.
Yeah, I
bought a Volvo.
Yeah. Try not to run it into anything, but if you do, this is the top. This is
the best car to run. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that you had bill collectors chasing you and things like that back in the day when you were younger. Do you ever have nightmares about that stuff still?
I get reminded all the time. You hear like I hear the phone ring or something, right? Or you just naturally look for caller ID and see who it is. And oh my God, thank God there's no, don't really use answering machines anymore, because hi, Mr. Cuban, this is such and such bank. We're still expecting that payment. I mean, just not good memories.
In closing here, what are you most optimistic about here? I mean, we really don't have a whole lot. A lot of people don't seem to have much to look forward to right now. What do you think we should be looking forward to as a nation?
I mean, look, there's no better time ever to start a business than right now, because all businesses are effectively going through a reset. As we start to open back up and figure out what's going on, big businesses are protecting their legacy businesses and see what's going on. Medium-sized businesses, the same thing. Small businesses are just trying to adapt If you're starting from scratch, you can build a restaurant that already deals with social distancing and HVAC that considers the virus and all that. If you're starting a service company, you can start off working from home and be comfortable because people have already gotten used to Zoom. You don't have to find that first office, and so there's a lot of advantages. And with the protests and the riots, that gives us just one inkling of hope that maybe we'll make progress. That maybe this time we'll listen. And that's why I've tried to speak out. You're asking me these questions are great. I'm trying to, get involved in the minority community, going to, events, going to Black-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, all businesses, trying to help any business that was looted and impacted. But in particular, those people who are at the greatest disadvantage right now, I've been trying to connect to and help.
Mark Cuban, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jordan. It was really enjoyable. I appreciate the questions.
Hope you all enjoyed that. For more interviews just like this, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show. It's a podcast. You can find it in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Click here to subscribe to the show. Click here for an interview with Eric Schmidt, former chairman of Google, and click right here for an interview with Kevin Systrom, founder of Instagram.